Thank you for joining us today. Today we're discussing delivering successful outcomes, not just a successful project. If you have any questions, please leave them in the question and answer box. And we'll start off with some introductions. I'm Ali Stubbs. I am a project administrator here at Myriad, as well as the facilitator for today. Hayley, would you like to start us off?
Sure, thanks, Ali. So my name is Hayley Fox. I primarily came from a technical background and in the last few years have moved over into a team lead role. So I'm the team lead for the consulting services group within Myriad. And part of that role is a project management role and project delivery. So this topic today is something that I'm very passionate about. I always strive to ensure that we deliver a successful outcome and not just tick boxes on delivering a particular project.
Awesome. Nathan?
Hi all, I'm Nathan Pearce. I'm the National Sales Manager for Myriad. I come from a non-technical background and I've been with Myriad for about 8 years. Most of my focus is on working with our clients to make sure or help them with achieving their goals and aligning the services solutions that we offer with the likes of Hayley and James. To make sure that we're actually, one, ticking all of those project boxes, but helping them in the long run as well. Thanks, Ali.
Thank you. And James?
Hi, everyone. My name's James Milne. I'm the CTO here at Myriad Technologies, and I work with Hayley and her team delivering technical solutions to our customers. So I come from a very strong technical background of over 20 years of consulting in technology, and I guess I bring the technical lens to the panel for today's session. Back to you.
Awesome. Well, let's kick right off. Hayley, can you articulate to me from your perspective what you mean by a successful outcome?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, the biggest difference between a successful outcome and a successful project, we need to be delivering outcomes that add value. So if we're looking at something and we can't articulate the value that it brings to the client and what value people get on a day-to-day out of what we're delivering, then I would question, are we actually going to be delivering a successful outcome at the end of the project? So yeah, primarily I think it comes right down to value.
Wonderful. And Nathan, you're more on a sales side. So does your role give you a different view of what success looks like?
I'd say yes and no. So given a lot of our engagements do start with conversations that I have, we're always looking to not just deliver a technical project or technical outcomes, but it goes right back to the approach that we take of, for everything that we do, we are looking for what is the business outcome that you're trying to achieve. And I think adding to what Hayley said, we try and look at it, or we do look at it from a few different lenses as well. So in the past, we've had people come to us and the long running joke in Myriad is people calling up asking for a SharePoint, but then trying to uncover what it is they're actually wanting from SharePoint. So, and across the business as well, because depending on who you're talking to, they might have a different view of what they're trying to achieve. So CFO looking to, reduce costs or get the best value, bang for their buck out of something. People in IT wanting to, update technology, release brand new exciting things. But then also the likes of, depending on the business, efficiencies across whatever it is they do as a business, whether it's mining, manufacturing, construction, healthcare, defense. And then some of the more subtle ones, like people who sit in HR and culture teams as well, around what they're trying to achieve. I don't think if you take one lens and aim for just that, I think overall kind of missing the point a little bit. So yeah, I do say not having a deep technical background, it's definitely where is this adding value and how many places can we add value as well is a key focus of mine.
Wonderful. And how do you uncover what an outcome is, James?
Obviously, up front, we try and do a lot of triage and understanding what's actually motivating a client when they first approach us. And to go back to Nathan's point, when they ask for a SharePoint, usually during the pre-sales cycle, we try and unpack that to get an understanding. Is it a compliance issue? Is it a change management issue? Are we trying to digitally transform, or is it just a simple project that they're just targeting? So part of the articulating the needs up front is definitely important, but as a team, we have to keep everybody on the same page. And as we pass through pre-sales into project delivery and then post-support, it's looking for not just the initial project outcomes, but then what are the bigger picture outcomes that we can discover along the way.
And
So, Ali, if I could, I guess, expand on what James said there, around how we uncover the outcomes. I think for me, it's mostly about trying to drill back down into business goals. So anytime that we're looking at a project that has very technically focused goals, I really question where that value is that I was talking about earlier. So, to Nathan's point, I want to install a SharePoint. That's a very technical focused goal that really, it's hard to align that project then to the business value. So I'd be inclined to kind of drill a little bit deeper and go, well, what is it that we're trying to achieve? Like James said, what are the problems that we're trying to resolve? Is it that you're trying to increase communication throughout the business, or do you need to look at your risk and your compliance, and trying to align back to a business goal rather than just a technology focus?
Yeah, I think just talking about our approach as well, rather than we do try, so from my point of view, I do try and get other people from Myriad involved in those early discussions as well, as early as possible, so that it's not just a salesperson's view of the world of what we actually end up proposing or doing from a customer, to make sure that, one, I haven't missed something, but also if we are having a very technical discussion, is there something else that we can do up front to help guide the customer to what are you actually trying to achieve? So in those instances of, I just want a SharePoint, and we get the comment, sure, what color? More often than not, if the customer or whoever we're talking to can't articulate what they're actually trying to achieve, we will spend the time up front with them helping define, either what are your business goals, or how could this technology or solution, what things could it offer to help you meet those business goals as well.
Awesome. And can you provide any examples of a project that has been successful, but the outcome hasn't? Hayley?
Yeah, so the one that comes to mind when we're talking about successful project versus outcomes is the tunnels in Brisbane. So on paper, it was a very successful project. It came in on time, came in on budget, ticked all the boxes in terms of being a successful project. Ultimately, though, the tunnels weren't used. It didn't add value to people, so they're not using the tunnels, and the people who originally built them were lost a lot of money, and it really wasn't a successful outcome at the end of the day. So even though it was a successful project, it didn't produce successful outcomes.
Yep. And James, can you provide an example of the opposite thing happening? Project's not a success, but the outcome actually was.
Sure. We see plenty of those opportunities, and I guess the most obvious one at the moment would be the NBN. We saw that project stumble along for years, over budget, over time, and became a bit of a political football along the way. But in today's environment, and take today's example where we're all joining this conference from the comfort of our homes or offices, wherever we need to work. In the last couple of months, we've really put the NBN to the test, and the good news is that we've all transitioned across to being able to work from home in the new way of working, and the proof has been in the pudding that we've been able to do it with very little downtime.
Awesome. And given that you all work in different areas of the company, how do you align your views so that the project's a success?
I'll jump in first for that one. So going back to what I said before, we have the open upfront conversation to make sure that even before contract signing internally, we've shared, across the different teams. So we're not just, in the sales sense, just doing a tick and flick and throwing something over the fence and then going, hey, delivery, go forth and sort this out. We do make sure that, whether it's via our standard project processes or even just talking to the teams around, look, this is what they're wanting to do. This is how I'm thinking we go about it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there anything that we've maybe missed? And then bringing the customer into those conversations as well. So again, before we actually sign anything, we're all on the same page and expectations are being managed and set throughout the project as well. We've had, I've seen instances, and I can think of one particular to Myriad where we've effectively gone, here's the contract, sign it off, and then gone, hey, to delivery, here's a piece of work, go and do it. And we've seen the pressure that puts on the team, because to their credit, they're always trying to look for where are we delivering value and not just off ticking technical boxes or putting bodies on site to do stuff. So for me, it's definitely around having everyone involved as much as possible. Once we've got something that we, or once we've started to have the conversation of how are we actually going to go about doing this and what are we achieving.
Probably just to add to that, I'm in a fairly unique position being the CTO and also being a trainer from way back. So I've got the luxury of working with Nathan and being pulled into those pre-sales conversations up front to have the technical conversations for each customer and whether they make sense or not. And then usually I have the opportunity to work with Hayley in the delivery team to actually at least produce the solution, or at least work as part of the team to create the solution. And then from a training perspective, I really enjoy being able to roll that solution out and deliver training to the customer and be able to reinforce the original intent of the project, but also give people a working understanding of what the solution is as they're adopting it. So I get an immense amount of enjoyment out of being able to be involved in each step of the process.
And Hayley, what would you say is the biggest factor to a successful project?
Because there's probably two that I can think of, and that's clear communication. So, back to the question that you were asking before around how do we make sure that everybody has the same outcomes? It is clear, frequent communication. And the second one, which kind of, they go hand in hand, is surprises. And surprises are, do not bode well for neither successful projects nor successful outcomes. Anytime that there's a surprises can surprisingly go very badly, which is not at all what we would want to happen. It's around having that clear communication to make sure that there are no surprises for people.
I have a slightly left of field one to throw at that. For myself, I think the biggest factor that I've seen is the people involved in the project on both sides. So having the right client stakeholders involved, So project sponsors, users, people who understand what they currently do and how, whatever change we're putting in place will make things better or add value to them. But then definitely on the vendor side as well, the people, we've seen plenty of projects that have reached the brink of failure, but then bringing the right people into it have been able to turn it around very quickly and still deliver a successful project. But more than that, a successful customer outcome as well.
Probably looping back to the change management conversation and the fact that people usually don't like surprises on projects. I've seen a number of projects, primarily in my early days, that we used to call the Big Bang approach, where people used to spend a lot of time developing intranets and then they'd reveal them to the organization all of a sudden without any communication plan. One of my first SharePoint projects was actually one of these where we technically nailed it. We got the intranet up and running. And I remember talking to the CTO at the time and saying, how are we going to announce this? How are we going to roll this out? Are we doing a training plan or what? And their approach was the Big Bang approach, where Friday afternoon, we just switched across to the new intranet. Come Monday, everybody came in. They didn't know what the new intranet was. They didn't know how to use it or anything like that. And unfortunately for the CTO, he wasn't working for them by the Wednesday. So, you've really got to factor in bringing everybody along for the journey to make sure that everybody understands what the project's actually trying to achieve, but also at the end of the day, what the actual project has delivered and what could be potentially next, where the organization can take it.
So in that instance, obviously the people was the risk in the project. Would you say that usually the people are a bigger risk or the process is a bigger risk? Hayley?
Definitely people. So I think a project will be successful if I had to choose between people and process, then I would go definitely people. People are the ones who can cause surprises. If you don't have smart people on projects, then ultimately it doesn't matter how good your process is, that project is most likely to fail, or at least not be as successful. I think if you've got smart people, then they will come up with the right process to deliver the project, and they'll be able to deliver it regardless of the process that you have. So yeah, people.
But picking up on the smart people, one of the risks that we see regularly in a number of our projects, especially when we're training staff within the customer's organization on being able to manage the new solution, a lot of the time, one risk that we don't usually plan for is those people are then smarter, have more skills, and we have seen periods of time where those sorts of individuals get headhunted. And we've had situations where projects are due to go live, and a week before go live, their staff have been poached off to other jobs, and then we have to sit down and revisit how do we want to go live. So keeping that agile methodology in place of how do we achieve the successful go live and being able to adapt to those changes as they come up is critical.
Yeah, I completely agree with Hayley that biggest risk in any project is the people on both sides as well. So if you've got the wrong project team off delivering, then I'll say it's doomed for failure from the get-go. But also on the client stakeholder or the larger project team, whether it's differences of opinion, differences of approach, or worst case scenario, people who do like to drop surprises. The classic example of, we know we had this deadline, but hey, we want to bring it forward by 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. If you've got the wrong people, they're not going to react well to that. If you've got the right people, they will come up with a way to still make it successful.
And so what is more important in a project, people or process? Hayley?
Yeah, people, for the reasons that I gave earlier. The right people will design the right process if there's not one there. So the right people will be able to deliver the project, but you can have the best process in the world. If you don't have people following it, then the project's not going to be as successful.
I, again, 100% agree. With the right people, the right people in the room, you can overcome most challenges that pop up within projects, no matter what it might be. So we've seen plenty of instances across the board where changing project managers, changing, whatever the role is within a project, on either side of the fence, has again brought things back from the brink of disaster.
Temper that with being Mr. Process. We always like to make sure that the processes are defined. It's pretty hard for the people to follow the process if they don't know what it is. So communicating that process out. And I guess one of the other big risks that I see in a lot of projects is people focus on the current way they do business or the current way they manage projects, and they're not open to change or how do we do this better or how do we optimize things. One of the things that drives me nuts is when people say, but that's the way we've always done business around here. It's having that willingness, people having that willingness to look at processes differently and look at opportunities to enhance or optimize them moving forward is a key attribute to enabling people to digitally transform in this market.
Do you guys have a preferred methodology for delivering a project?
Yeah, let me take that one, being that it's primarily my role. So, look, we do at Myriad use a combination of waterfall and agile. So as a lot of project methodologies will tell you, particularly more modern methodologies, take the bits of those that work. So we do tend to use the best of both. We use a bit more of a waterfall approach in the beginning to gather the requirements. We use the waterfall approaches of the project controls, setting up projects, setting up visions, making sure that we've really nailed those business outcomes, doing that business analysis side, making sure that we understand all of the business requirements of the project, making sure that we've got a really good starting point for our design. And so we kind of follow all of the waterfall approaches there. And then once we've got a good design that we've all agreed to, then we can switch more into an agile methodology. So the agile methodology really gives us that ability to avoid surprises. So the problem that we often find with a full waterfall approach is that everybody agrees to the design in principle and on paper, and then we go off and build it, and ta-da, big surprise. And as I said earlier, surprises have the potential to go very badly. So doing that agile methodology of small iterations and showing people routinely means that we can really avoid those surprises and help people along the change management journey. We also very much recommend that people are showing the wider audience, so not just showing the project team what's being delivered, but the wider audience as well, and bringing them along the entire path. So yeah, that's the approach that we tend to take at Myriad. Having said that, the underlying there is the approach that works for the people that are on the project. So like I said, having smart people on the project, they'll come up with which parts of methodologies they need to use. And I think it's about being able to tailor your methodology to the individual project to make sure that you get to the successful outcome.
I agree with I 100% agree with the second part that Hayley said, because I'll temper this with Hayley does run a lot of our project management. So I will take her advice on what she thinks is the best way to achieve something. But for me, it's whatever methodology will give the best outcome for any particular engagement. Whether it's falling in line with the customer's preferred way of doing it, or if it's, if it is a pure agile approach and we think that's going to give the best outcome across the board, then yeah, for me, it's definitely whatever will give the best outcome. I don't think there's any one way is the best way and use that every single time. To what Haley said, it's, yeah, whatever will give the best outcome. And being flexible enough to be able to make that work within your teams, I think is the key there.
I think I agree wholeheartedly. Different methods work in different scenarios. For me, in my role, a lot of the time when we're engaging with customers and they don't necessarily know what they want, going back to Nathan's point of we want a SharePoint or we want to digitally transform, what does that mean? What does that mean to the business? So I find agile becoming a more and more frequent methodology for spiking out what is possible and being able to demonstrate to the business what is the art of the possible. Especially when I find, going to the business and going, hey, do you want a form? Do you want a mobile app? Do you want a dashboard? And a lot of the time, people understand these concepts, but until you actually demonstrate it to them and put it into their context so they can visualize what's possible, a lot of the time they don't really know what to ask for. So the traditional waterfall methods struggle in that scenario. So I've been really enjoying spiking out agile sprints with customers to actually flesh out what is possible in today's environments.
Sorry, that just made me think there's plenty of other factors that would probably come into it as well. So size and scale of the organization. So government department, for example, probably not as open to a full agile approach compared to your straight waterfall, but also, I guess, as we call it, the maturity, digital maturity of the organization as well. This is all brand new to them. Going off and, just doing the big bang approach might be too much change for them to take on as well. So again, taking all of those factors into account as part of that planning up front, and working with the customer or understanding where they're currently at and want to get to, needs to feed into how you actually approach it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So when it comes to measuring an impact on an organization, what are some ways that you can measure this impact? James?
I guess measuring impact can be measured in a couple of different ways. There's the obvious tangible measurements, and then there's obviously the intangible. Trying to get an understanding up front of a project of what the motivations are for your digital transformation projects is usually key to help identify what some of those metrics are. So when we start talking about some of the tangible metrics, we've had a number of customers seek to reduce the old ways of doing things. So for example, they find that they've got a very email-centric culture. So they might put a KPI on the project that they want to reduce the number of emails that the organization sends around. And we've seen a number of customers achieve very successful outcomes. Trying to remember some of the stats, like 29,000 emails a month being reduced down to 1,200 emails. And that was simply because, rolling out a new intranet where people could find information. So they didn't have to keep emailing each other and saying, can you send me this document? Can you send me that document? They could go to one location, find it. And that was a very successful metric. But then you need to look at some of the softer skills or the non-tangible KPIs. It could be things like staff engagement. It could be collaboration. And there's some interesting metrics for measuring collaboration. How often does the intranet pages change? How often do documents change? So we can translate some of those non-tangible metrics into more measurable metrics that we can actually report on after the project.
I have bear with me, a bit of an example on one of those intangible outcomes or impacts from a project that we ran a few years ago. And it was with a long-term customer of ours that we'd been working with for a very long time. And they came to us and wanted us to automate part of their accounts payable process. So it was supposed to be a very short, sharp project. We knew the people, we knew the team, we knew the systems and everything else around, and we knew, the stats around how much time they were going to save because they'd done all of that work for us. The project ended up blowing out to something like 6 months, so about 5 months more than what it was supposed to be, because the people in the team couldn't agree on how they wanted things to work in the new world. So by all measures, was it a successful project? No, it ran way over time, took a lot longer. Just after, by the time we had finished it, the impact or what the business, the people, the key stakeholders in the business have started to see is more focus on understanding how they currently do things and how they could do things in the future after going through the pain of people in the same team doing the same role going, no, we do things this way, versus someone else going, no, it should operate this way. So definitely to what James said, there's things that are intangible and can lead to a greater outcome on the back of some of these projects as well.
Well, Nathan, you actually made me think of another previous project where we were rolling out communities, and the initial brief we were given was that the organisation had completely disparate HR processes across the globe. So HR processes in Asia and Australia and Europe and America were all completely different, and therefore they needed completely different HR communities. And from a project perspective, we kind of we didn't necessarily agree. We kind of asked a lot of questions, and the customer was adamant that HR was different in each region. So we went ahead and we provisioned different communities for different regions. But the interesting thing was, within a month of delivering the collaboration platform, HR gained the visibility of being able to look into each other's communities across regions. And they eventually came back to us and confessed that although they thought each HR department was discrete and handled their processes differently, once they could actually collaborate and share their information with each other, they started to see that there was a lot of alignment. At the end of the day, onboarding somebody, offboarding somebody, doing the professional development was the same business activity across those different regions. And from a project perspective, they kind of realized that we'd provisioned a whole bunch of communities, and they came back to us and said, actually, we want to fold them back into one HR community. So the organization gained process visibility into what they were doing and actually gained an insight into how they could better improve their HR processes.
So what are some of the critical building blocks for a successful outcome? Hayley?
In terms of building blocks, I guess making sure that you've got that clear communication set up, making sure that you've got a really good, clear project vision and project outcomes. So knowing what you're trying to achieve. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, then how do you know if you've actually achieved it? So I think it's about making sure that you've got clearly defined vision, clearly defined outcomes, what you're trying to achieve, and revisit them often, and keep asking yourself, is this still valid? So projects, particularly long-running projects, what you thought was key and critical a year or 2 years ago may not be key or critical now. And as the project is evolving, there might be things that are no longer required. So for me personally, the way that we operate, we have a statement of work that says this is what we're going to do on the project, and there's a heap of deliverables around those, but we'll continually look at those deliverables and go, are these still valid? I don't want to be just delivering a deliverable because it was written down on our project plan a year ago, that's what we needed. We still need to keep asking ourselves, do we need this? Does it add value? If it doesn't, could we use that effort somewhere else? And I think that, to me, is the real key behind delivering successful outcomes, not just ticking boxes on a project plan that says, yep, I've delivered my project as I've said I was going to.
Are there ever times that you do just knuckle down to deliver what's in the scope?
Look, I guess ultimately we can advise, we can, we can do all of the right things, and there comes a time when the client may just go, look, thanks for all of the advice, but we just want to get in and deliver this project as we'd intended to. I can't think of a really good example. James or Nathan, do you have an example of a good example of where we've done that?
I can't think of a specific example, but as a business, there are times where, yes, we've made I'll call it the tactical decision to just take on a project, deliver it, and move on. That doesn't stop us from providing the advice and guidance all the way throughout. It's just in our nature to take that approach. It's something that's been drilled into me ever since I started at Myriad. But yeah, I'd say that are times where, yes, we just knuckle down and, we'll take on, please build this workflow, please build this web part, without having that full understanding. But again, we are as long as we keep that communication open and raise it with the customer that, look, we can deliver it. Here's the risks, here's potential challenges, here's what you need to do on your side. And yeah, we're still doing everything in our power to make sure that it's not just we've ticked the boxes, but there is some extra value in it for the end customer.
I find personally in those situations where we have had to do that, I find staying in contact with the customer and maybe doing a checkup in a month, 3 months, 6 months to see how things are going. Typically we start to see, maybe sometimes we get it wrong, but maybe sometimes it's a learning experience for the customer. And, for some customers, we need to give them something for them to understand whether that's right for them or not. And then once they have that, they've got a baseline that they can come back to us and talk to us about, well, maybe it needs to do this, or what if it could do that? And then we can maybe pick up where we left off and hopefully get them in the right direction. Yeah,
that did make me think of one example where we're fulfilling a mainly technical role, or in a current project, we're fulfilling a mainly technical role with the broader project team across both Myriad and the customer. It's not where we want to be, and it's not where the key stakeholders in the business want us to be, but they see it as a necessary evil to help move them along into a better place so that they can start to have those more thoughtful conversations internally and with us around what they're trying to achieve. And again, knowing that up front and being able to have that conversation versus, hey, we need someone to build these things for us, is leading to a better overall outcome as well, versus just body shopping some SharePoint people to build things, because we're still able to maintain and have those strategic conversations in the background. We ultimately know where they're heading or wanting to get to and how we can help them along with that, versus just putting up a wall and going, no, we just build stuff for you.
And in this market at the moment, with the amount of cloud offerings we have, I'm finding more and more customers are shifting across to the agile methodology rather than taking the hard line of we want an intranet or we want a DMS or whatever. They're more open to, hey, we've got this thing called Office 365. It's, think about the last couple of months, bang, we're all on Teams. We're starting to see these really good conversations with customers going, well, we're now in Office 365, we're now on Teams, what's next? What can we now do with the platform? We understand there's a lot in there, but help us make the educated decision of what's next. Is it Power BI? Is it Flow? Is it Power Apps? We don't know, but it's part of informing their decision on where they are on that journey into digital transformation.
So Nathan, what are some of the foundations that you see in a successful project?
There's a few that come to mind, but I think I can wrap it up best by saying partnering with our customers and everything that entails. So I personally don't like the role of playing body shop or just pure vendor or order taker, because we can provide a lot more value than just, again, providing bodies or providing tech to our customers. So key one for me, and something that I do spend a lot of time talking to customers or new customers about, is the fact that we deliver the best outcomes, or we can deliver the best outcome for you in a partner model. So it's not us versus them, or we're not on opposite sides of the fence, but we are working together. Flowing on from that, and if we can reach that point, it means we can start to have the more open conversations of, look, to achieve this outcome, here's everything that needs to be done, or we think needs to happen as part of this project, whether it's short or long term, and start to actually advise and teach customers how to go off and do some of those things as well. So in James's words, start to teach customers how to fish versus us doing all the fishing for them, as one of the big things. One of the key things to anything that we implement being a successful outcome in the long run. It may sound counterintuitive, but we don't want to be the gatekeepers, or we don't want to be around forever doing every single little thing for a 365 implementation. The best value that a customer can get from something like 365 is by the people in the business owning it. So being able to build that model and that approach through a partnership with them is, I'll call it my biggest building block for anything that we take on.
And we have just had a question come through. So how do you deal with the customer that at the time of you at creating delay or put the project on hold?
So I can answer that if you like, Ellie. So what I'd be inclined to do there is have a look at why they've put it on hold. So my thinking would be that there's an underlying issue. So UAT is notorious for being a point of delay. It can cause a lot of delays because we're asking for a lot of time from the broader business there. So we're kind of going beyond the project team and trying to start incorporating more people to do stuff for us. So it is notorious for causing delays to begin with. But I'd be looking at why that delay is happening. So is it a lack of time? If people aren't able to allocate the time to the project, then I'd be tempted to look at the business value that the project's actually delivering. Because if it's delivering, if they're unable to prioritize time to it, why are they not? Why isn't it getting a priority in their day-to-day lives? Is it just not going to deliver a value to them? Look, I understand that the argument there is everybody's busy, everybody's trying to do a job already. But if something's going to deliver you a lot of value, then you put the time towards it. So it might be a change management thing that people are not quite ready to deal with the change. So we'd need to look at the communications plan and the change management piece around the project. There's a number of reasons why it would be delayed at that point. And I'd be looking at that underlying reason, which would be going back to your stakeholders, going back to the business and finding out what's actually causing that delay.
From my perspective and my experience, I've typically seen a lot of delays in UAT. You know, the whole point of UAT is, you know, shakedown testing by the business, but also environmental testing of, is this technically going to work in our environment? So putting the technical issues to the side, because, you know, obviously we can go off and troubleshoot those or get vendor support to resolve those issues. It's typically, as Hayley was starting to discuss, there's usually a difference between what the business was expecting and what we've actually delivered. And this is part of the point I was making earlier around, ideally we'd have the business involved earlier in the design or the speccing out what the business process would be. So a common delay I see is we try and, or somebody asks us to automate the current state process in UAT, and that's usually where the business picks it up and goes, well, wait a sec, no, we don't want to continue doing business the old way. We want to try and do it a new way. So, you know, a lot of the time, these delays in UAT are actually expected, and we just have to roll with them. But we've seen plenty of situations where customers have identified big disconnects between current state and future state. We've got one classic example where a customer fleshed out their onboarding processes, and then when we went to implement it, that's when they finally paid attention to it and realised that we're about to digitise their current state and not the future state. So standing back and giving them the time to actually adjust that and correct for it before we push that into production just makes sense at the end of the day.
I think as a fallback to, you know, being able to have the open conversations around why is this happening? And if it is a hard line from the customer, which we've personally seen in the past as well, having the right project controls in place. So again, you can talk to what the risks, the potential issues that might arise from it before you reach that worst case scenario. And worst case for me, from a client engagement standpoint, is people reaching for contracts. So personally, we're doing everything in our power to avoid that point. But do need to understand that sometimes business is business. Things like COVID popping up, a huge number of our customers started to close down, go off-site, projects got pushed out because of what was happening around the world. So with best intentions, yes, we do try and work around it. But there's still, from a project standpoint, and Hayley can definitely attest to this, having the right controls in place does still give you a way to manage that moving forward.
So, James, with your experience, how do you see driving the adoption of change management and governance?
That's a really good question. We see governance as a big part of a lot of the projects we do because, you know, going back to, we don't want to just deliver a technical solution. There's got to be a reason why, and we've got to align it with governance. Typically, we see working with Hayley and her team to create a change management plan and a communication plan. And I typically like to see that being extended out to the training program as well. So we can basically, as we're training people on the new platform or the new system or the new solution, it's also about letting them know, but allowing them to understand what were the governance decisions made along the way to get to that point. But also, if there is a question, which there usually is, where and who do we escalate that back to? And it's about being able to create those spaces so those sorts of conversations can actually happen in a natural forum.
Yeah, so just, I guess, expanding on that, personally, I don't see a project reaching a successful outcome without having a governance plan, training plan, and communications plan. If you don't have those on your project, then I don't want to say doomed to fail, but your success chances are decreasing drastically. So yeah, I firmly believe that they need to be on every project, whether we do them or they're done by the client, irrelevant. Like Nathan said, we're all one project team. but they need to be there. We can deliver the most technically sound solution, but if people don't know how it's meant to be used and how it's going to be maintained ongoing, which is your governance plan, it's not gonna work. If people don't know how to use it, which all comes down to your training plan, then it's not going to work. And if people don't know that it's there, or when it's coming or what to expect, then, which is your communications plan, then, the last place that you want to be in is having delivered a technical solution that nobody knows exists, nobody knows how to use it, and nobody knows who's managing or maintaining it. So without those, it's just not going to be successful. You're just not going to get to a successful outcome, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So what are some of the tips and tricks that you can use to help elicit a successful outcome? Nathan?
So training plan, governance plan, and plan. No, sorry, Nate.
No, but as you were talking, Hayley, it made me think about some of the creative solutions I've seen with customers to drive adoption. It's a bit kitschy, but it seems to work really well. I've had a number of customers, when we release a new intranet, they'll have some sort of promotion or a competition where they'll hide an Easter egg somewhere in the intranet and challenge people to go find it, and there'll be a prize or an announcement for the person who finds it. And that's a very subtle technique to actually get people to start using the platform without necessarily realizing it. And that's free. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do a big campaign or anything behind that. It's relatively simple to do.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that I look for, if we're off doing a large project or implementing something brand new, or fundamentally trying to change the way a business operates or goes about something, one, it's being able to have the open conversation with the customer. So having the type of relationship or working with the right people that you can have the hard conversations. From a Myriad standpoint, one of the things that I always look at is if one of our projects is 80% tech work, so 80% development, then I think we're missing the point. So always looking for, with the way that our platforms are now, looking for that mix of we're doing more business engagement than pure tech work is one of the key things that let me go, hey, maybe we either don't understand what we're trying to do, we're doing, we're in the wrong role, we're just the tech people for this, and we can't guarantee what the outcome's going to be. Where we do get it right and we spend the time up front understanding what the business is now, what they want to achieve, who the people are, how they go about things, we can generally make smarter decisions around what we build and do it more efficiently. But then on the back end, spending the time embedding governance, onboarding the users, so training, helping them get set up, helping them understand and use it, making those minor changes to suit specific teams or people, roles, or even locations is key to me. So if we're doing more business engagement than tech work, that's my first kind of guide to, yes, have we scoped this right, and are we off doing the right thing?
And we have just had another question come through. What tools do you use to say your project was successful or valuable?
I'll jump in first there. So going back to the very beginning, understanding across the different lenses or people within the business, what is actually going to add value, and being able to measure that across time, whether it's, immediately after go live, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the track. Have we actually added value in multiple places? So just being able to go, we cut the processing time down for a key business process. Sure, how do you actually, what metrics are you putting against it to measure it? Is it within one team across the whole business? Is it a dollar value? Is it headcount? Is it, people's enjoyment at their job or engagement with the business? Are all factors that play into, did we achieve what we want to? Definitely goes back to understanding what the customer wants to achieve and how far along that path we can get them there, whether it's part of the way or all of the way.
And just picking up on Nathan's point about customer satisfaction, there's some really simple things that you can do, especially when you roll out a new intranet or a new collaboration platform, is just do a customer satisfaction survey on the homepage to measure people's sentiment of what they like about the new solution, what they don't like about the new solution. And then that can feed into your continuous improvement program around enhancing the platform or adding new features or removing features that didn't work.
Yeah, I also should have said that I don't think it's something you can measure just once and then say, yes, we've achieved it. By nature, business will change. Factors around business will change over time. So in some ways, they need to become these living, breathing things that aren't just built and then left alone forever and expected to always achieve the same outcomes. That's where too often we see these big projects run. Something's put in place, and then 6 months down the track, it becomes shelfware, or people are making moves to go off and go through the same process again to replace it, versus understanding where it might have just missed the mark or what simple things could be done to realign it to the way that the business works now, or in the best case scenario, putting something in place that can react with the business as business changes as well.
Wonderful. So we have come to the end of our time today. I just want to thank all of the attendees and the panelists. So thank you for coming.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thanks, guys. The recording will be posted up on our website, so if you do want to share it or come back and revisit, it'll be available online. Thank you very much for coming along.